Welcome to As I Live and Grieve, a podcast that tells the truth about how hard this is. We're glad you joined us today. We know how hard it is to lose someone you love and how well-intentioned friends and family try so hard to comfort us. We created this podcast to provide you with comfort, knowledge, and support. We are grief advocates, not professionals, not licensed therapists. We are you. Today we are speaking with Liz Tichenor. Liz has put down roots in the Bay Area but is originally from New Hampshire in the Midwest. An Episcopal priest, she serves as rector at the Episcopal Church of the Resurrection in Pleasant Hill, California. Tichenor and her husband Jesse are raising 2 young children and continuing to explore the adventure of living, parenting, and serving in their community. Some related passions include running, fine baked goods, growing as many tomatoes as possible, chasing after their puppy, and ethical pranking. Liz is also the author of The Night Lake, a young priest maps the topography of grief. You can learn more about her work as an author at www.liztichenor.com. That's www.liztichenor.com.
Hi again, everyone, and welcome back to As I Live and Grieve. You're really going to enjoy our guest today. We have with us in our virtual studio the Reverend Liz Tichenor. And before I go any further and really get into the content of today's episode, I would like Reverend Liz to give us a little bit of her background.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Sure.
I am an Episcopal priest. I serve in Pleasant Hill, California, which is just a little bit east of San Francisco. And my work in life and in the church has been really formed by my grief. So my mom died by suicide a few months before I was ordained, and about a year later, our infant son Fritz died suddenly and totally unexpectedly. And so this was all I was learning to live with grief at the same time as I was learning to do my job as a priest. And so that was now 8-9 years ago, and I'm still learning. It's still unfolding as I work as a parent and as a priest and all the rest. What that looks like, how that plays out.
Right. We tell our listeners all the time that everyone grieves differently, that your personal grief and journey through grief is as unique as your fingerprint. It's differentiated by not only circumstances, but by your personal age, your relationships, and everything. So even though we may say, oh, I know how that feels, well, we may have a fair idea, but not precisely. Now, I would imagine for you, Liz, it has to be really complex to not only be grieving as a mom, losing an infant son, but also as a minister, because you're a role model for others. You lead a congregation of people. So it's difficult to show truth without showing weakness.
Yes, absolutely. And I think so much of what we are tempted to categorize as weakness is actually vulnerability that brings out connection and possibility and help. And it feels so risky to show that, and it's critical.
I can only imagine. Now, I discovered, so to speak, or I met Liz as I was searching for potential guests. And one of the methods I use, I hope no one else steals it, but no, it's easy enough. I always look for new books that have been published that deal with death, dying, or grief. And Amazon is always my go-to place, as it is for many. And one of the books that came up in the search was The Night Lake by Reverend Liz. And when I read the summary, I was awestruck. I thought, here we have a priest who lost an infant with no explanation. I have to read this book, and I have to try to get her to be a guest on our podcast. So without going into detail that might make it uncomfortable for you, could you give our listeners a little summary of the story of what happened that night on the lake. And why were you on a lake?
Yes. So I'd finished seminary, and my first job, or my first jobs, I was splitting my time between two places, at a parish down in Reno, and then at a Episcopal camp and retreat center up on Lake Tahoe. And so my family and I were living in this little cabin on Lake Tahoe. And at this point, it was my husband Jesse, our daughter Alice, who was then 2 years old, and then our son Fritz was born there. And when he was 40 days old, he was clearly not feeling great, enough so that I took him into the urgent care doctor in town, who said he was totally fine, and he didn't have a fever. I could tell that he was sick, but the doctor was not concerned, said, well, we'll do some more tests tomorrow, but don't worry about it.
Mm.
And he just cried and cried and cried and cried. I finally got him to sleep and laid him down on the bed next to me. And not long after, I suspected, I just had this sort of weird sense that he wasn't breathing. And do you wake the baby? Do you not wake the baby? This is ridiculous. You should never wake a sleeping baby. But it didn't seem right. And so checked, and sure enough, he was right there next to me. I had not gone to sleep, and he wasn't breathing. And my husband did CPR, the paramedics came, everything, and there was just nothing to be done.
I have to admit, with your book, and I have it in Kindle, and I read that chapter, and I read the accounting of that night for you and for your husband, and even your experience at the hospital with staff and everything. And I could only imagine. Now, I lost a baby at birth who was first declared stillborn. Then they said, no, he's alive. And 24 hours later, he expired. But I never saw that baby. I never held that baby. So to have an infant that you've been able to bond with has to have been it's beyond imagining for me.
The whole time you were telling the story, I've got chills. I just,
of course,
can't.
Of course. Yeah. And I confess, I have not been able to get much past that chapter because I am so compelled by that chapter and what you went through. So you published this book, and according to publishers' summaries and everything like that, you talk about moving on through grief. In fact, I think you used an expression, you are learning, I won't say have learned, but you're learning how to carve out space for the slow labor of learning to live again in grief. And I think that's the words of whoever wrote the summary. I don't know if you wrote it yourself or if somebody wrote it for you. But does that make sense to you? Can you explain what that experience is like? How to carve out a space so that you can learn to live again in grief?
I mean, so I think it has taken a lot of different shapes over different periods of time. Early on, I mean, I think everything changed. My ability to carry out simple tasks or stay on top of, basic responsibilities was really challenging. And so early on, I think some of the work was totally reorienting myself, my expectation of what a day might look like, what I might hope to quote unquote accomplish
Right.
over what productivity, that maybe this is not actually a time to be productive at all, but to learn how to be in my body and how to be present to what had happened in a way that I think really for me both required slowing down and also a huge part of it for me was I decided to take up running, and wasn't a runner at all, but found that was a way that I could settle in with or be present to grief in a way that just sitting still really didn't work for me. It was overwhelming. I couldn't hack it. But moving, being forced to breathe out on the trail or slowly slogging up big hills, that was a place where I could. And I think too, it has been a labor of recognizing that it's going to be different at different seasons, different times of the year hit me in
Right.
wildly different way. I'll be totally fine, for lack of a better word, for a long stretch, and then just be overwhelmed, caught off guard.
Yeah.
I have learned to recognize the patterns and anticipate them over the years, so
Okay.
I can be proactive in some ways in setting things up. Like I'm actually pretty confident that on his death day I'm going to need this, or
Hmm.
let's clear the decks and make space to go be with a friend or be in the garden. Or
Right.
I suppose in some ways it has been a work of radically reorienting my sense of what I'm supposed to do and how and when.
Mm-hmm.
I like
And
that phrase,
Mm-hmm.
radical reorientation.
Yeah.
I like that.
How do you,
Eh,
I mean, as being a priest, I guess I think that you should always be able to provide hope to everyone.
mm,
How
uh-huh.
do you find the strength to provide that hope to others when you yourself might have been struggling with that?
Mm. It was really hard for I'm not gonna say for a while. It's still hard sometimes.
Right.
So the my church works off of it's called the lectionary. It's this calendar that most mainline churches share that says, these are what the readings are for a particular Sunday.
Right.
And the readings appointed for this coming Sunday include the very end of the book of Job. And so
Oh,
basically, in a nutshell, Job's life has just completely been shot through. He's lost everything. Everybody's died. It's been terrible. And now, ta-da, he gets 10 new kids and lots of money and cattle and lives happily ever after. And I'm just like, this is this is bunk,
Mhm.
This is like, maybe, okay, maybe he does get lots of new kids and maybe they're fabulous. And that actually doesn't fix the fact. They're not substitutes, they're not replacements.
Right.
And so I guess to your question, Stephanie, when I come to these places of really wrestling with the day, the holiday, the reading, whatever it is, I try to be really honest about that. I try to bring the truth of my experience and my story into it, because
Right.
anything less than that feels thin to me. And I suppose on a deeper level, where I have been able to offer hope, I hope, or point to it, has been grounded in the reality that we have been so completely surrounded by goodness and joy and just incredible support all the way through, even at the very depths of grief. People were showing up to love us and carry us through, and it didn't erase the pain, but
Right.
people joined us there, and that actually did feel like a tremendously hopeful thing.
yeah. Kind of that theory about the more people that share your burden makes your burden
Hmm.
a little bit lighter for yourself. It doesn't erase it.
Hmm.
Right.
It makes
But it
it just a
changes it.
little bit lighter. Yeah,
Right.
it does change it because you know others are there to support you. Now, I have to ask,
Hmm.
did you at any point, you probably know this question's coming, you could probably almost guess, did you at any point yourself lose your faith in God?
No, I think my encounter of God changed an awful lot over the course of losing my mom and losing my son. But I didn't subscribe to a theology that says that God steals people away to punish us, or God takes them because God might need them for something else, or it's part of some greater plan or design that we just don't know. I had I had understood God to be deeply loving and compassionate, and that God weeps with us when terrible things happen. That an absolutely loving God would not want a baby to die. That doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
And so it was awful, absolutely awful to lose my mom and my son, but it wasn't actually, it didn't, their deaths didn't contradict my understanding of God.
Okay. Yeah. It brought to mind, in my creative mind, I'd like to do a T-shirt that says, God is not the control freak you think he is. Because a lot of people have that image
Right.
of God being supremely in control of everything. And as you say, he wouldn't want us to hurt as deeply as we hurt when we grieve. He's not that type of God. So I agree with that. I have to ask another aspect of that, if you will. Recently, we had a Methodist minister on our podcast for the second time, and we asked her to help us understand the difference between spirituality and religion. And we kind of came up with a very loose correlation in that religion usually involves a denomination of some aspect with possibly some certain traditions and everything. But there's a congregation, a community of people involved in that religion. Spirituality is far more individual, and it's possible to be both spiritual and religious at the same time. Can you offer any insight into any potential difference between spirituality and religion?
Yeah, I'd say that there's maybe a Venn diagram there. There's plenty of overlap, and I think you can be one or the other and not both.
Right.
I think we don't see this as much as the social pressure to attend church has largely fallen away in our country. But I think for a long time, that was just the expectation that everybody goes to church. You have to be seen there. And
it's how you were brought up. It's how I was brought up.
And so I think there were probably plenty of people who were there because they were supposed to be, and so might have been religious on the surface in that way. They were attending and practicing, but maybe not connecting in spiritually in their hearts themselves.
Right.
And I think no religion has a monopoly on the holy. I think you can certainly connect with God or the cosmos, or however you want to talk about it, on your own. What I have found, and why I've made this my vocation or my work, is that I think it's really hard to do it alone. I think that we need most of us. I wouldn't be so bold as to say all, but I think that most of us need support and community and fellowship and accountability. We need to be able to do it with more diverse voices than we'd likely find and seek out on our own. One of the things I especially love about my context, my congregation right now, where I'm serving, is how wide the political range is. It was particularly interesting last year. As any other sphere, social media, or standing in line to the grocery store, or waiting to pick my kids up from wherever I was, I would hear such vitriol being sent in any number of directions. And so to be in a community where we were then coming together and choosing to listen to each other and love each other and serve alongside of each other, I think we really need that. And it's hard to come by other ways.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. So I know, serving as a priest in your church with your congregation, there are times that you are called on when a family has experienced the death of a loved one. Sometimes it's very easy for us to say, "Oh, I know how you feel." It's not the right thing to say, but
no, it isn't.
We reach for it because we don't know what else to say. One of our quests in our podcast is to try to find something or some things that you can say to people that will let them know how you feel about what they're experiencing. We even, though we're not part of the ministry, we've not gone to theology, we've not practiced it, we don't know what to say, but we want people to know that we're there for them, that what they're going through is normal. We just want them to know that. Do you have anything to offer our listeners about something that you might say or words you might use?
For when someone has died and
Yes.
speaking to those who are mourning.
Yeah, like if you go to calling hours or something,
Yeah.
we say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And,
Yeah.
and so many of them are just empty platitudes.
They really are. There's you may find some nuggets and maybe also some some laughs. There's a chapter later on in the book that goes through all kinds of the things that come in sympathy cards, what people say, stuff like that. One of the things that I have heard from friends, from loved ones, rarely, but that has stuck with me is it feels at once adjacent to and also entirely different from the I know exactly how you feel. I know just what you're going through, which please never ever say to anyone ever,
Yes.
because it's not possible. It's not true. You have
Right.
we have no idea what people are actually going through. But a number of times I heard people say to me things like, "I'm trying to imagine what this might be like for you. I'm
Oh.
trying to imagine, and it breaks my heart," or this is what I'm feeling. And I think so often we are we're so afraid to join people there, even as we love them and want to support them. We're also really scared
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
of getting too close to the death, the grief, whatever. Is this contagious? Am I gonna catch it?
Right.
Right.
And so, which is, I think, exactly why we offer platitudes. Platitudes are not actually about making the person mourning feel better. They're about making
Right.
the
Us
speaker
feel better.
Right.
That's
feel
right.
more comfortable. We said something nice and now we can walk away and go about our day.
Right.
Right.
And I think I think frankly, it takes a lot of courage to actually do the work of imagining, of trying to join them there
Yeah.
and let them know that we are trying to join them there. It's
Mm-hmm.
because it's if we really stop and imagine, it's painful.
Yeah.
And it's frightening to imagine that that could happen to me. I could in an instant, the car crash, the whatever.
Right. I think you hit the nail on the head there. In our hearts, we're afraid that it'll happen to us. We
Yeah.
know at some time it could very well, but
Mhm.
that fear comes back each time someone we know loses someone.
Yeah.
So I feel like when you were telling your story, in my head, I'm thinking, I can't even imagine. But I think we need to switch that. I can't imagine too. As you're telling the story, I'm imagining that happening to
I'm
me.
trying to imagine.
Yeah. So I think
Because we actually can. We actually have these
right.
amazing brains and big hearts. And when we throw up the I can't imagine,
Just a little
it's a way
change in
of
word.
keeping distance.
Yeah.
Right.
Of putting enough space between us and whatever that tragedy is
Yeah.
that maybe it won't hit in my life.
Right.
Right.
But then we don't join people
Yeah.
there when they are in fact there.
Right.
And it's different than saying I know just what we don't know just. We
Right.
don't,
No.
Right.
but we can try to join them, I
Right.
think.
Yeah, just because I lost my grandmother and you lost your grandmother, it might be similar.
Who knows
but
what those relationships
right,
were.
our
Yeah.
relationships could have been totally different. And yeah,
Mhm.
there's just so many factors there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that I have appreciated personally and that I often try to bring to these situations with
Mm-hmm.
when I'm pastoring and working with people who've lost someone is really asking about the person who has died.
Right.
What do you remember? What did you love about them? I don't get that question often about my son.
Right.
And in some ways
Right.
it's a challenging one to answer because he was so young.
Right. Yeah.
But when people say, "Tell me about his birth. What was he like as a baby?" It it feels like such a gift that they want to know. And
Right.
similarly in my work when people don't necessarily sometimes they want to and sometimes they don't, but sometimes people will just take off and share all these amazing stories of what impact this person had on them, or what,
Yeah.
what funny quirks, or, this recipe or that, whatever it
Yeah.
was that they are hanging on to. And
Yeah.
making space for that, I think, can, really inviting it can be a gift
Yeah.
to the
I,
person
I
mourning.
I'm glad that you said that because I wanted to ask you a question, but I was staying back. I
Mm.
was like, no, maybe I won't.
ask.
You can ask anything.
You have 2 children.
I have 2 living children. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was like, "Oh, am I gonna say it that way too? Am
How
I
do I?
gonna hurt
Yep.
someone's feelings?"
Thank you
No,
for
it's
that.
fine.
Thank you for
It's
that.
so delicate, and
It is.
again, everybody, it's all different, but then some are
Yeah. And I answer it differently in different settings.
right.
There are times when people ask me how many kids I have, and I just think, I, I don't want to get into it right now.
Do I have to tell
I have a
you?
10-year-old and a 6-year-old.
Right.
Like, let's
Yes,
go on with our
yes.
day.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
but I
just
have
the
3.
bank teller. You've
Yeah.
only got 2 minutes with me. I can't tell you.
Yeah. Like, which version do you want? I interrupted you. Go
That's
ahead.
okay. So your 2 living children, I'm assuming
Mhm.
that you're very open with them.
Mhm.
It's just quickly picking up on your personality about a sibling that they had, but didn't
Mhm.
know. And do you regularly talk with them about him and even your mother too?
Mhm. Yeah, it's shifted over time. Yes, I mean, and the most basic answer is that yes, I absolutely talk with them
Right.
about their brother Fritz and about my mom, and it's shifted over time. So my daughter was just shy of 1 year old when my mom died, and so I mean,
Right.
she wasn't verbal yet. It
Right.
was,
Right.
she didn't know what was going on, but she was 2 and a bit when her brother died, and she was super, super verbal at that point. She didn't understand the
Right.
Right.
the implications of what had happened. She didn't understand what death was really, but she knew she'd had a brother and that now he was gone. And so early on there, I mean, we talked about it all the time. I don't know how many times a day I would tell her the story of her brother dying. That was what she wanted to hear
Yeah.
over and over and over and over and over again, was how he died. And so for years, it was this very central theme of conversation, both when Alice was young and, figuring things out for those earlier years. And then when our son Sam was born, so he was born, I don't know, a year and change after Fritz died. So then by the time Sam got to be 2, 3 in there, he started asking all these questions. He wanted to hear all these stories. He'd
Mhm.
see Fritz's picture. We'd have cake on his birthday. There's a
Mhm.
tree planted for him. All these different ways of connecting in. And so it's been a real process of trying
Yeah.
to figure out um, how to help them know their brother, how to help them
Mhm.
understand what it means to be family and what it means
Right.
to
Right.
be connected through or beyond death.
Mhm.
And then similarly for their grandma, I it took me a while to tell them to figure out for myself how I wanted to talk with them about the fact that
Mhm.
she died by suicide
Right.
and
Right.
had this history of alcoholism, a complicated death. But I decided I actually really did want them to know that, to know I didn't want it to be a secret. I
Right.
didn't want,
Right.
them to, they're teenagers and somehow, I don't know, Google or whatever, find out what
Right.
actually happened. And then, I mean, I think the message that comes is this: we don't talk about this. This is
Right. It's
off
a
limits.
secret.
Right.
It's
It's a
a
secret.
secret.
Right.
I really,
Yeah.
really didn't want that. And so have tried to be open with them about that, sort of giving more information as they get older,
Mhm.
and also trying
Right.
to my daughter asked me what a hashtag, what that means the other day, and I so I explained, at least originally is this way to, search for things on social media.
Yeah.
But thinking about it now, I feel like some of how I try to help them know their grandma is by offering these sort of verbal hashtags as we go through life. It's
Mhm.
like hashtag Grandma Susan, like, oh, I love this recipe. Oh, that was your grandma's, or
Yeah.
she
Mhm.
taught me how to do this, or I think you get this from her. just sort of adding this narration or captions to help them know
Yeah.
what it is that they
Right.
receive from
And to
her.
have a connection.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Have a
yeah.
connection. That's nice.
The other thing that I did, I don't know where this idea came from, but when we were cleaning out her house just after she died, it popped into my mind to try to collect a whole bunch of things that could be gifts to, at that point, just my daughter. She was the only
Mm-hmm.
one, but I thought hopefully we'll have another kid that we could give them over the years. And so gathered this huge Rubbermaid tub full of kinds of, toys and books and art supplies, and so they get a present. They get a gift from quote
Yeah.
unquote, their grandma on their birthdays and at
I love
Christmas.
I
that.
love
And
that.
I love that.
it feels, and at this point, like I think at my daughter's most recent birthday, there's just, I don't know, there's a million things going on and I forgot. And a couple days later, she's like, "Where's my present from Grandma Susan?" Like, what gift? I mean, she was polite. But she was like, "Isn't
Yeah.
there something?" And I was just so delighted that she
Yeah.
was looking
Right.
forward to that.
Right.
And
I love that idea.
Yeah.
I really, really do.
Uh,
That should be a children's book. I'm sorry,
Hmm.
but you have another book in you. Do you have any signs, for lack of a better thing? For a lot of people, it's a cardinal. We had a guest on our podcast that wrote a delightful children's book about remembering people that have died, called The Fox and the Feather. And it's about finding a sign that will connect you to that person that you can remember. Are there any signs in your days, like a cardinal or a feather or something?
Not exactly. No, not a specific
right.
thing, I don't
All right.
think. But I
Okay.
love that works for some folks, or that it
Well,
comes, I
yeah,
guess, arrives.
exactly. Good. Okay, super. We've explored a lot about your book and your experience, but I have to confess, I looked at the website and I was reading your bios.
Mhm.
And I understand that I don't have the exact degree, but you have a master's in ethics. And then in another bio, I read that one of the things you like to do is ethical pranking. So
True.
I have to ask, Reverend Liz, what's up?
What's up with that?
What's up?
Well, I do. I love a really good practical joke, and so many pranks, so many practical jokes are unkind. They're about
Yes.
making people look and feel foolish, or be the butt of the joke that everybody else gets to,
Exactly.
or destroying stuff, or I don't know, wasting spending a bunch of money to do something. And
Right.
so I have over time tried to come up with sort of what are the tenets of ethical. I've created sort of a manifesto of ethical pranking. Things like you've got to be able to the pranker has to be able to clean it up. It needs to not destroy anything or hurt anyone.
Right.
It's not making fun of, and everybody gets to enjoy it and laugh
Right.
at it. Things like that. And
Nice.
that is
I
a
like
joyful thing. Yeah.
I like it. And does your congregation get to experience any of your ethical pranks,
There
say around April
are
Fool's Day?
well, so this past year, gosh, what a weird year to be doing any kind of work. But as it turned out, April Fool's Day fell on Maundy Thursday, which is the
Okay.
Thursday leading up
Yep.
to Easter.
Uh-huh.
A very important holy day in the year,
Yes.
but it was also this important holy day of April Fool's Day, a very
Yes.
important holiday to me. And so at the time, given all the restrictions and whatnot, we were not gathering in person. We were live streaming our services, but we were allowed by the county and state guidelines to have this tiny skeleton team. There were, I don't know, 5 or 6 of us alone in the sanctuary, distanced and all the rest, to create the live stream to send out. And so I confess, I did hide rubber snakes at sort of all, like in the sound booth and on the lectern and on the organ. And the most wonderful part of it was that somebody found them and quickly re-hid one of them to get me. I did not see until after the service began, and so had to work really pretty hard to not be cracking up all through this very holy day. There's a rubber snake sitting there looking at me.
I love it. I love it. Oh my goodness.
Gotta find joy where we can, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Unfortunately, our time is about up. But before we wrap up, Reverend Liz, I would like to offer you a few moments alone with our audience, so to speak, without Stephanie or I asking questions, guiding the dialogue. Just a few moments that you can speak directly to our audience, whether it be through prayer, whether it be through a message, anything you would like to say.
I suppose what I would want to offer to close with is the encouragement to settle in wherever you are with your grief, whatever rises, whether it is, wrestling deep in the questions and the uncertainty of how life is going to unfold in the wake of whatever loss it is, or in the joy that catches us off guard, and in being allowed to laugh and actually feel good sometimes in the middle of it also. I think sometimes we get the message that if we're mourning, we should be really consistently mourning. And yet I think the joy surprises us. It shows up unbidden, unexpected, but it comes, and to let that be also.
Very nice. Beautiful words. Yep. Beautiful words. Okay. Well, again, sadly, I always hate wrap-ups because it means I have to say farewell. We've loved having you as a guest. I could speak to you for hours, literally.
Thank you.
And we appreciate so much that you were willing to share your story. I do hope that people will consider reading your book, whether they purchase it, whether they look at it for the library, and if the library doesn't have it, maybe buy it and donate it to the library so it can reach people. Just the small piece of it that I have read is very powerful, and I have no doubt at all that the rest of it will be as compelling. So until next week, listeners, thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you again, Reverend Liz. And everyone, take care of yourselves as we all continue to live in grief.
Thank you so much for listening with us today. Do you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, or do you have a question from one of our episodes? Please email us at info@asiliveinGrieve.com and let us know. We hope you will find a moment to leave a review, send an email, and share with others. Join us next time as we continue to live and grieve together.